Decide on what you want to do and do it really well and see where it takes you. Overnight success is a rare thing, and if it doesn't happen quickly enough for you, don't give up. Keep going. Keep going.
House music wouldn't be the same without Simon Dunmore. As the founder of the iconic Defected Records and a DJ with deep musical knowledge, he has shaped the culture and sound of house music for over 3 decades. Simon shares hard-earned wisdoms on self-belief, the power of community, and navigating social media, offering young artists a masterclass in what it takes to build a lasting career.
We live in a world where it's information overload. It just keeps coming at you. So the only way that you're going to gain traction is through.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dojo podcast. Today with the man, the legend, the original founder of the iconic Defected Records, Simon Dunmore. Welcome to the podcast.
Nice of you to invite me, Ben.
Yes,
appreciate
it. It's a real pleasure, and we're honored to have you. You are obviously known as the founder of the iconic Defected Records. You retired last year from Defected Records.
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Actually,
oh my God, time flies. I was just about to say. Time flies. 2 years ago from Defected Records. I am so happy to have you on the podcast because, you know, you are, as I said, an iconic industry figure. You have contributed so much to the house music scene. You have been at the forefront of starting iconic events like Defected Croatia. You've been in Ibiza from the start. And I would just like to find out how you got into music. Take me back to before this was a profession, and how was the passion ignited for you and how you got into music?
I think obviously I'm from a different era, and you know when I was young and in my formative years and influenced by your environment, there wasn't the distractions that there are now. I mean, there was the TV, there was the radio,
right.
And there really wasn't much else. So, and you had 4 channels on the TV.
I remember that.
I don't know how many channels there are now. Literally thousands. Yeah. So if you watch Top of the Pops on a Thursday night, literally millions of people watched the same program, the same artists, and that would stimulate interest in in certain acts and certain cultures and certain movements and stuff. And so watching TV and watching Top of the Pops, and there really weren't too many programs on the TV that broadcast music. So they had big impacts on people and big influences on me. And then you would listen to the radio. You would have Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3, Radio 4, and then much later into my life, pirate radio became a thing. But one of the radio stations back in the day was Radio Luxembourg, which was a pirate station, I guess, in its early form, broadcast from a ship, I believe, in the ocean, but you could pick up the signal. And
I heard about this. I think they made a movie about it.
That would be probably a little bit more eclectic and specialist presenters. So you would probably get a broader sense of what was out there apart from the records that were being played on radio. And although on Radio 1 back in the day, the DJs and the presenters would have more free choice than what they have now. Now it's pretty much a rigid playlist that they have to stick to and a format they have to stick to. But producers back in the day, I've come to learn that you could plug them, and presenters like Tony Blackburn would play soul records that were his own personal taste, and give those records an opportunity to grow. So anyway, that's way back then. So my first kind of real things that influenced me was definitely Top of the Pops, and then there was magazines like Smash Hits where you'd hear a record, you'd buy a record, you'd buy Smash Hits, and then they have the lyrics of each individual record, so you'd study the lyrics and you'd put a poster on your wall of acts.
We're talking your teens right now, right?
We're talking probably, maybe not even my teens, maybe 11, 10, 11 years old. And then, my first band that I was really got into was an act called Slade, glam rock band. And then probably from that, David Bowie, I think, was the first really kind of culturally iconic act who stayed with me till he died until this day. So And there's probably not too many acts that resonate and change and were chameleon-like in their music and their look. And I mean, obviously you have massive reach now with social media, but I think once you got into that zeitgeist of being on the TV and being in, in the magazines and whatever, you made a real impact culture, and they had real followings. I mean, you see people would dress like David Bowie, and and go to the concerts and make not just at the concerts, actually in everyday life.
Yeah,
so, music was really tribal back in the day. But they were my first experiences of music. So.
Right. And was that something that was instilled in you from your parents, or was it something that you went down the rabbit hole because you had your own interest in music? Was there any? Because when I talked to Archie, he was saying, his mum was a raver, and I have a sort of similar background where my dad really instilled listening to jazz and lots of music when I was a child, and that really influenced me. Did you have a similar thing with your parents? Or
no, I'd love to say that my parents gave me a great education in music and whatever, but I remember vividly my father being, we're sitting in the back of the car going on holidays, and he had an 8-track stereo, and I mean he would we'd listen to the Carpenters or Glenn Campbell or Gene Pitney or kind of country rock and middle of the road. He liked James Last, who was like a big band producer, and so it gave me no education or no rabbit hole to go down. I think if there was a rabbit hole to go down, I pretty much found it and created it for myself.
Okay, I love that. I mean, somebody has to do that, I mean, I know some people who have these kind of musical backgrounds with their families and some don't, but they end up in the same place, And I guess if you just have that interest and there's something that fascinates you about the culture, you go and explore yourself.
Yeah, and I think that, in that era, I had the time to do that. I mean, my father moved his job 4 times from my age of 10 to 14. I mean, that was quite disruptive to my childhood and my education and stuff. And I think
did you move to different places as well? Or?
Yes, yeah. So we moved from the Midlands to the South Coast, and then to the South Coast to South London, and eventually we ended up in West London. So. And I think probably music was one of the few things that I kind of took with me then. And I think, when you're in a new environment, you have to make new friends. It takes you a while to acclimatise and to make new friends. So probably music was my friend, my escape. And it's a long time ago. But yeah, I eventually found myself living in West London. So.
Right. Which was an amazing time, I imagine, to be in West London, right? Which is... I guess 70s then we're talking?
Yeah, you're talking 76. I ended up in Uxbridge, which was when punk exploded. Yeah. And the local university was Brunel University, and I very vividly remember the Sex Pistols and the Stranglers. It was quite a famous, iconic gig, the Sex Pistols playing there and the Stranglers. And that, that music, I was like, whoa, what is this? I mean, it was like nothing you'd ever heard before. And, the attitude and of the bands and the movement and the culture and the fashion that went along with that shook the world. I mean, it was amazing to at least... I was too young to go to the gigs, 14 years old, but very aware of what was going on.
Yeah, same. I can very much relate to that. Very aware about the music that was about, but too young to experience it, and just waiting for the day where I could just go to these events. So what was the first exposure to DJing then, and to DJ culture? Did this sort of come naturally? Was there a love for dance music or soul or house first? What came first?
No, I mean, house didn't exist when I really started first to collect records. So what was... I went through various things. I went through a rockabilly stage. I went through a two-tone stage. I went for a new romantic kind of stage. And that actually led me to disco. I mean, the record... Spandau Ballet chart #1 or Haircut 100 favourite shirts were disco records, and the rabbit hole and the journey that you go through when you discover music that you're really into. There was an act called Blue Rondo a la Turk, who a guy called Chris Sullivan, who was curated nights at the WAG Club, which was a very influential club in Soho, and so you become aware of what influenced those acts, and and then I eventually got into disco. And that eventually got me into soul. So I kind of went from dance music and fashion music and deep into black music, actually. So I'd love acts like Maze or Bobby Womack or Kenny Burke or the Fatback Band or Brass Construction, and then at the time there were DJs like Jay Strongman and Norman Jay, and they were playing Rare Groove. It was not the mainstream. It was definitely alternative. I definitely felt that I didn't want to be part of the mainstream. I mean, Frankie Knuckles made a famous quote. I was lucky enough to interview him when he was live, and he was just like, the exciting stuff was never on the main road. It was never on the main street. It was always the little side street or the alley where you found the really interesting stuff. And I found myself just getting more and more into more obscure and the roots of music
Black music coming over from the States, from disco being a big thing, and disco then, the famous incident where I can't remember who it was, but where they burned thousands of disco records
Chicago,
in the stadium.
The Disco Sucks,
like a Disco Sucks rally sort of thing, like almost like a book burning type of thing, where they burned all those disco records. And then really disco going underground, from it being like a very mainstream thing, John Travolta, Bee Gees, then going underground again, right?
Yeah, I think
then propagating that kind of club culture, I guess.
When any movement becomes popular, it gets hijacked by the mainstream and corporations and stuff. And, disco initially was producing some amazing artists and some amazing music. I mean, the Philly International record label and whatever, one of my favourite labels, which had the OJs or Gene Khan or Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and Teddy Pendergrass, like incredible records. And then, as you say, the Bee Gees produced Saturday Night Fever, and there were these horrendous disco records, Dance Yourself Dizzy and Disco Dark, and there was definitely a backlash against that, because those records were they were challenging rock and roll, and the old rock and rollers definitely were just couldn't align themselves with this new music, and justifiably so. But also going back to the Demolition disco thing, there were racial overtones in it. They were destroying and blowing up records that weren't disco records. It was that's well documented. And but then when that happened, it went back underground and it reformed itself in which eventually became house music. But at the time I was collecting Rare Groove records and listening to pirate radio, listening to Solar FM and the presenters that were on there, your Bob Joneses, etc. They would play records that would send you on a journey to go and find these records. You go out on every Saturday and Sunday to record stores. You'd dig deep and you'd discover records, or you'd get mailing lists. I'd get a mailing list through the post. It would arrive on my doorstep. It would have a list of records, the price of the record. You'd phone the person up. Is this record still available? If they only had one copy, you'd probably be unlucky. If they had 10 or 15, you'd buy it. You'd send a check. You couldn't buy records online and pay them according to their account number and sort code like you can quite easily now. So you'd send a check. You'd wait for maybe a week for the record to arrive on your doorstep. And then initially I would play them for myself and friends, but then I would make cassettes. I would give them to people, and you gained a reputation for being knowledgeable about music and sharing that knowledge with people. And then one day, a girl, I've told the story many times, so she asked me to play at her party. That was the first time I ever DJ'd. But I think most people that became DJs in that era never viewed it as a profession.
No, it wasn't at the time, really.
No, and you never viewed it as a way that you were going to be able to, it was going to be your living and you would give up your job. I worked in Marks and Spencer's in the warehouse.
Right.
I worked at a dry cleaners. That was how I earned my money, and the money I earned from DJing just allowed me to buy more music.
Yeah, okay.
And indulge myself.
Self-funding your hobby, so to say.
Yeah, and it was. I'd go to local bars and pubs, and I would offer my services and say, look, I can play music. It's not going to be the mainstream. I'm going to attract a certain crowd, a crowd that's going to be there for the music and not be any trouble. They were going to spend money behind the bar. Of course, landlords appreciated that. And eventually I had a little network of nights to the extent I'd probably be DJing 4, 5, 6 times a week, almost. I mean,
around London, yeah?
Yeah, around West London.
Yeah.
And then I could give up my job. I mean, they weren't nightclubs initially. They were bars that would, and the closing hours at a bar in that time, bars closed at 11 o'clock at night. So it wasn't like I was, up all night, every night, the kind of schedule that DJs have now. I wasn't getting on a plane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no joke being a DJ in these times, especially if you've got an international reputation.
It started for me in a very similar way, Simon, which is interesting. Like, I was on the London circuit, just in London for years and years and years, and actually made my living out of that, before I ever got on a plane. But so those were the first paychecks, so to say, coming from DJing, right?
Sure. Eventually I got offered a job in a record shop.
Right.
And I think that was probably my first serious kind of thought, well, maybe I can make a career out of this. I took a job in a record store, a guy called John Jules, who's still a DJ on My Soul FM and DJs really extensively. Anyway, he bought this store. I had a really good relationship with him. He kindly offered me a job at the store, and I was closer to the source then. I was getting records as they were being released, or promos, etc. So it extended my knowledge and my reputation. Other DJs would come through the door. You
built relationships,
and it was a community. A community of DJs, and you got to earn their trust by recommending them good music. So, different DJs have different tastes. So you'd have to understand the broad portfolio of jazz, funk, jazz, soul. Who would buy imports? Who wanted the UK version that was cheaper and whatever? And they would have their racks. You would put records in, and you would wait for them to come through the door on a Friday, Saturday. You'd pull their rack out, they'd go away, they'd listen to them, they'd say, I want this, and they give you...
You know what, like, I remember this just so vividly.
I mean, really early curation.
Yeah, and I remember the hierarchy in the record store. When you come in and I'm going like, this one, this one, this one, this one, and then somebody else comes in, like maybe like a well-known DJ. I remember like I was record shopping, and then like I think Rocky came in from Express 2, and they were just pulling out a stack from behind the counter and gave it to him. And I was like, well, like, why can't I get those records? What are they pulling out for him? Like, why aren't those on display? And they're all white labels. And I was just like, And
it was a hierarchy. And, if those DJs supported your record, or you knew that, you're listening to Norman J on Kiss, and he played a South Soul record, or, Inner Life, Justin, and whatever, you go as supported by Norman J, as supported by Express 2, and those kind of endorsements were really important. And and then on certain times of the week when the shop was really crowded, Saturday afternoon, your imports would come in, and you'd play a record, and there'd be 20, 30 people in front of you.
What's that?
And they'd put their hand up, and then you'd have enough copies to service everyone. So it was an interesting I mean, obviously record stores are making a bit of a comeback now, but probably not to the extent where you've got that kind of. I mean, when we first started Defected, we deliberately opened our store opposite Black Market Records. Right. So the DJs that would frequent the store on a Friday and Saturday would then come over to over the road to us. We deliberately wanted that to say, what's new? Have you got any promos? You've got, you maybe get some test presses.
I'm really interested in that. Can we just rewind it a little bit? So to how did Defected come about? When was the first time that you decided, I have to start my own record label? What was the vision behind it? Did you have a vision mapped out already for what Defected was going to become? Did you have like this vision already, like it's going to be a big thing, I'm going to do events, whatnot? Or was it just like, I just want to put out some records that I like?
Oh my God. It's way kind of, actually quite, it's more than that, but simpler than that.
Okay.
At any point in my career, I don't believe I ever had a master plan.
Okay, that's really interesting. Oh my God,
There's no point when I was, my younger self, 20 years old, 25 years old even, that I thought I need to own a record label. I didn't understand enough, wasn't even in my thought process. And I think this really applies and is useful to most people today. Decide on what you want to do and do it really well and see where it takes you, see where it leads you, see the opportunities that it may create for you. So when I was DJing, first off, I never thought I would work in a record store. I just thought, this is just great playing records. Then when the opportunity presented itself, I thought, that seems like a logical step forward. And then I worked in a record store, and I worked in the store with gusto, and I'd be knowledgeable about records, and I'd find where I could source certain records from certain distributors, whether they be domestically or internationally, and I'd have to have those records. I'd have to be the first shop in that area to have those records to attract the DJs that I wanted to come into the store. That gave me a reputation, and some of the people that came into the store worked at record labels. So that introduced me to another type of person. Eventually, I thought maybe working at a record label would be a great opportunity. So a job became available. I applied for a job at MCA Universal. I went for an interview. I never got it, but it gave me the experience of speaking to people, being interviewed, trying to understand that process. And eventually I got offered a job at Chrysalis Records. They had a dance label called Cool Tempo. They'd put out some hip hop records. They'd put out Eric B. I know you got soul. And some early Jelly Bean records, and it was the A&R. There was a guy called Danny D, who's gone on to be an amazing publisher and have an amazing career in the music industry. He produced a record called Acid, one of the very early acid house records. But he was the A&R at Cool Tempo Records, along with a guy called Steve Wolf, and they offered me a job doing club promotions. So I left the record store to do club promotions, and again, I threw my heart and my soul into it. I wanted to be the best. And I think at any stage of your career, if you've got people that give you guidance and good advice, and whether they're officially your mentor or just your mentor by being in close proximity to them and learning from them, and I think that was really useful for me. And I learned loads from a guy called Steve Wolf. He taught me really how to promote records to DJs, and that gave me an understanding of how records evolve through the cycle, from signing a record through to it being released. And even when it's released, that's just the first step of how you promote a record. What can you then do to take it from being a DJ's record, or a record that's being played in clubs, or a record that's being supported on pirate radio, to national radio?
Right.
So it was an amazing education for me. So I would then go into, I'd hear a record, whether it be I'd go into a record store, or I'd hear, Roger Sanchez on Kiss FM, coming over and playing records 6 months before they were ever released, because he had access to those. Some of the records he made, so he was playing them in advance. Sometimes, Strictly would give him a record saying, "I know you're going to go to the UK, and you're going to be in front of loads of people. So you'd have an acetate?
Right?
Can you play these records on acetate?" So you'd hear records way in advance of them being released. I would hear these records. I'd find out what label it was on, and then I'd phone them up and I'd say, "Can I sign this record for the UK?" And then you'd find out if it was available, if the rights were still available. Then I'd go to my boss, because I was still doing club promotions at the time. "If you sign this record, I know the DJs that are going to play this. I know where it's going to be supported, And it empowered me. It gave me an incentive to really to promote the record because I felt I was a part of it. So, you know, the A&R guy trusted me, signed a couple of the records. I then got to promote them. And the records went on to do, you know, records like Elias, Follow Me, or River Ocean, Love and Happiness. And the records went on to do really well. And eventually I got offered a job doing A&R. So again, it was never... I never felt when I started at the record label that I was going to do A&R.
Right.
It was just an opportunity that presented itself, and I just stepped into the role. And then I got offered a job at A&M Records, running the dance department. So my remit was to sign the records, but also to promote them. A&M Records would have some pop acts like the Police and Sting and Janet Jackson, and the A&R people and the marketing people would come to me and say, right, how can we make these records work on the dance floor?
Right.
So I would then commission the remixes for those records. I signed Alternate 3, which got to number 2 in the UK pop charts.
Yeah. I remember that record
I
well.
signed Mousse T. Horny. I signed Alcatraz, Give Me Love. I signed MJ Cole, Sincere.
Iconic record, one of my favorites.
I signed some records that I'm enormously proud to be associated with. But what happened was A&M Records was owned by Polygram. Polygram got bought by Universal. Universal decided that they wanted to merge A&M with Ireland. Lots of people I knew, my friends and people I worked with, got made redundant. And at the same time, Ministry of Sound were looking to increase their repertoire portfolio by setting up certain labels,
Right.
and they approached me and gave me a startup fund to start Defected Records.
Right.
And it was at that time when I wasn't stable because of the closure of the label and the redundancies. And if that had not happened, maybe I would have stayed. Maybe I just would have been happy being comfortable and having a good expense account and a great budget to sign records and you know, a good salary to, you know, it's just like I just got married and she just got pregnant. So it was a very, very kind of difficult time to go, I'm going to leave the security
take
of
that risk,
a major label
Yeah,
and start my own label. But it was the decision that just I felt was the right one at the time, because if my friends who were really good at their job lost their employment just because their faces didn't fit or because of a merger and consolidation and whatever, the next time that happened, that could happen to me. So there's no certainty working for somebody else. Being in charge of your own destiny by owning your own label, there's no certainty there either.
Yeah, I was just about to say, actually.
But if you failed, you failed on your own terms.
Yes, yeah.
And if you were successful, you succeeded on your own terms. So that kind of appealed to me at that time. And so I took the decision to leave the security of a job and start my own business.
Right. I wanted to backtrack a little bit and get into something that you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, which I think is really important, which is the importance of mentorship. You said you had these people that trusted you and that were somewhat mentors. We interviewed Wes, who was your number 2 at Defected and is now CEO of Defected, a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing. And he said he approached you and actually asked you for mentorship. And, you know, he spoke very highly and respectfully about the role you played in his life, where you just gave him a break, basically, and saw something in him that allowed him to thrive in this industry. How important is it to seek out mentorships? Should young producers, should young artists that want to learn something in this industry seek out mentorship, or do you think that we nowadays have so many resources online, like courses, like YouTube with how-tos, that we don't really need this anymore?
I believe if you can find somebody with experience that understands your goals and your ambition and your objectives, and that can help you navigate your way through that, and maybe help you avoid making some of the mistakes. I think, mistakes are important in any career trajectory. You learn from your mistakes. You probably learn, if you're clever, if you don't learn from your mistakes, then you're probably going to struggle,
right?
If you repeat them. So I felt that I learned from my mistakes, and I could give, and other people similar to me could give the modern day producer, the modern day DJ, the modern day record label owner some guidance how to avoid the pitfalls. And if the chemistry is right between you, I would definitely encourage anyone to find somebody, and I think anyone that's done well in business wants to pass on their knowledge. They want the next generation to succeed. So I think if you'd be surprised if you approach someone, you might be surprised that you get a positive reaction.
Yeah,
and it's mentorship is not a one-way situation. I mean, I've taken on mentorship with some people because I need to learn from them. I'm from a specific era. I have specific views on things. They're not necessarily relevant to what's going on in the world today. And I find that invaluable.
to stay sharp.
To stay sharp and to understand the way that the young generation think, and I think that there is obviously so much information available to people. Not all of it is good. You can take something on board, and it just may not be relevant to what you do. I mean, everyone posts about their success. Very few people post about their failures. So you can't look at the optimum of everything that's going on in the world and go, that applies to me.
Yeah, people just think, this is a career trajectory that anybody should be able to replicate. This is the norm. But people, like a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, like especially with social media, people project an image of what their life is like, and the reality is often very different. I mean, I certainly know this about the DJ life and the DJ career. People don't see the hardships of the DJ career and the unglamorous sides. And, when there's like 20 people on the dance floor, because you're probably not going to shoot a video or, take any pictures,
Sure. There's a guy I follow on Instagram called Elijah, who gives people guidance and, cultural guidance and social media guidance and whatever. And I very vividly remember him posting, success is an anomaly. Because, probably for all of the people that want to see DJing and producing as a career path now, probably 0.05% of the people succeed. Yeah. That means that, unless you're really lucky, you're going to be in the 99.5% of people that struggle to make it your career. And so I think if you build your career in a certain way, with some traditional values that have solid foundations and depth, which requires time and diligence and patience. I mean, it's just like overnight success again is a rare thing, and if it doesn't happen quickly enough for you, don't give up. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah. Because I mean, everyone's looking at the success stories now. Say Kind Music, right? Obviously,
it's been around for ages.
15 years. I mean, it's a 15-year overnight success story.
Yeah, I mean, I love that saying. As always, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success, because it's so true. People don't see the graft, You say like something that's built on solid foundations, and like what would you say those foundations are?
Serving your community. I mean, everybody, once they put themselves into the public domain, into the marketplace and whatever, that's when you start to gain followers. And initially you're not going to have many followers. It's going to be a small number. Yeah. So make sure that the small number that are following you, that you don't go off on too many tangents, that you don't necessarily all of a sudden, if you've got a reputation for in drum and bass, that you don't suddenly start playing house or vice versa, because people like to support the people that they feel are authentic, that they can relate to, and if you serve your community really, really well, they normally stay with you. They will have like-minded friends. They will tell their friends. That's how you grow a following.
Yeah, word of mouth. Yeah,
and it's only when it becomes to a certain level that you can maybe play chess with your community, then you can take them on journeys or you can introduce them to other things. But I think consistency of anything in life is really important now. The other thing I think is important is, clearly back yourself, believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing, but also, show respect to the culture and to other people and other DJs in the scene. Talk about other people's music that you like, or a great gig that you went to, or a great album that you bought, or because it shows that you care about the culture that you're investing in. Invest in the culture. Don't just take from the culture.
Yeah.
And I think that just gives you a broader. It gives you more to talk about. I mean, everyone's the Instagram and social media in a lot of instances is very me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And just I think people that really appreciate when you share your knowledge.
We had a discussion about this on my teaching platform, Dojo, recently, and young producers were asking us, what can we do on social media? I don't know what to do on social media. I don't have many gigs. I don't have much to post about. And it's like, well, you can post about many things that aren't necessarily just about you. You can put up a DJ mix, right, once every couple of weeks, and then you can, load up clips of, whoever you've included on the mix, and you can tag all of the artists in there. And I just sort of emphasize the importance of building the community and keeping relations with all the up-and-comers around them. And as you said, there's much of a me culture going on in social media, and I find sometimes people lose track of what it means to really build a community.
Yeah, I mean, it's my sons are want to forge a career DJing and producing and stuff. And
Did you try to discourage them?
No, how could I? But I didn't encourage them. It was like it needed to be something that they really wanted to do, and they've got the passion for it. I can
see their passion. Yeah.
And I say to them, do a chart. Oh, Dad, I don't really want to do a chart. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand what you do. A chart, you do a top 20. You've got 20 different labels, 20 different producers. You've got people that follow you that will be thankful that you've introduced them to 20 records that they may not know about. The producers and the labels will appreciate you're then in their vision.
Yeah.
That may lead to somewhere else that you've never, they may phone you, they may thank you. All of a sudden you've got a relationship.
That's it. It's all about the relationships. So we're always trying to emphasize that and just keeping good relations with everybody who's up and coming around you, and sending them your music, them sending you their music. And something that I found really interesting is that some of the artists that I kept relations with from the early days when we were all just trying to make it and trying to get international gigs have gone on to be massive artists. And you just never know who in your ecosystem.
You don't know where your break is going to come from.
Yeah.
You just don't. But also, it's not something that you have to stop everything that you're doing to do a chart. If you're digging for music all the time, you're buying your records on Bandcamp, you're buying them on Beatport, you're buying them on Traxsource, etc. So you've got your folder of records that you've just bought. You've probably got a couple of classics, that you've got in your folder for when you're going out and playing, whatever. So it's really easy to compile a chart and post it. Plus, it gives you a great social media asset. It gives you something else to talk about.
Yeah.
So there's so many benefits to doing a good chart and supporting other people's music. Of course, you can put your own records in there. I think, there was a time when I'd see someone's chart and it would be 20 records with their own. And I'm like, that's not supporting the culture, that's promotion.
Yeah.
It's two completely different things. Yeah.
Put 2 in there.
Sure.
And don't put them straight.
And don't put them at number 1 either.
Yeah, put it on number 2 or number 4,
Just show a little humility. And just those little things that may seem insignificant and a bit of a chore are actually can turn into a really positive thing.
That's one thing that I found when I started out. When I was sort of trying to make it as a DJ, I very much at one point I decided, okay, there has to be some sort of thing going out into the community once every couple of weeks. Be that a DJ mix, a chart, a remix, an edit, just something that you're contributing. And that's how you start gaining a following. And as you said, it starts very small. It starts into a small group of people that buy into you. And they can be very loyal people. And even if you keep relations with those people and just, talk to them, people will remember that. Seth Godin, who's like a marketing guru, called them the sneezers.
Right.
And the sneezers are the people who infect everybody else when they've got a cold, you know? So, but they can also be infected with you, you know, with being into your music. And they're the sneezers who will start infecting all the people around them with the virus of you know, what they're into. And I found that a very sort of descriptive term.
I'd never heard. I mean, I actually follow Seth Godin quite avidly, and he's an amazing. I mean, if anyone's watching, he did a book called Tribes, and you know, that was a book that I read that really changed the course of Defected. Actually, I think we were doing it subliminally and subconsciously and whatever, but it really just underlined that we were, you know, talking about small numbers when you start your social media game or you start your career. Everybody starts at zero. Yeah, you know, Defected. There was a point where we'd never put a record out, and now there are Defected 650 or you know, etc. When they started their Instagram account or their YouTube account or their Twitter account or whatever, they started at zero. But you grow through consistency and the consistency of your offering and serving your community in a really good way, and you know, informing them. It's not about self-promotion all of the time, because then people get tired and they probably view it a little bit more cynically. But if you talk about, there's another label that's got great. When we did the radio show, we didn't just play Defected records. You know, we would play records from the people that we were inspired by culturally. That was our way of saying, we see you, right? And then we'd shout about the fact that we'd seen them and then hope that they'd notice us. And the next time they make a great record, they would send it to us. Or when we phoned them up and said, we're doing a festival, we'd love you to play, they would play for us, and they would do so with enthusiasm, and you know, and I think that was a great way to start a relationship or relationships with people.
This is so valuable, Simon, because I think nowadays everybody's so focused on like, how do I crack the algorithm? Like, how does social media work? What do I have to put like as a hook so my reel goes viral? And they're just focused, I think, on the wrong things. I'm not saying that this approach doesn't work, because very clearly it does work. And we've seen the rise of the social media DJ. I have to say that something doesn't sit well with me with the direction things are going. And I see people coming through just purely from the strength of their social media following. And I don't want to tie them all with the same brush. Like, I don't want to just say they're all the same, because some of them, the heart's in the right place and they contribute to the culture as well. But many of them are people that I feel, for lack of a better word, leeching off the culture. So in terms of, you know, people who have built a massive following, I don't know, you know, for various reasons, because they're good at social media, and then they pivot into DJing, and it's not from the ground up thing where like people go like, I'm really into music, you know, I started making music, I started building a community, and then I started growing. It's like, it's almost like the social media thing comes first, and then they pivot into music and take away from that. What is your view of this? And are we just living in a new reality now where we have to accept that, or is there some way to fight back?
Well, I don't think there's a need to fight back.
Okay.
It's not just music and DJing that this is happening. I mean, say you're a boxer.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, it's just like, you know, all of a sudden a YouTuber is top of the bill in Vegas, and he's taking the opportunity away from someone that's trained to be a boxer all of their lives.
Who is an actual professional boxer.
As an actual professional, you know, and it's so celebrity, you know, culture is an important factor, in all walks of life and through society now. Yeah. And to certain people, that's always going to be important. And you know, it's probably always been important to be honest with you. But that was never the reason why I got into music. So those kind of people, I need to almost like learn to put them to one side. Yeah. Social media makes them very visible to a lot of people now. But you should really focus on the people that you feel are important to you and are going to give you the experiences and the information that that you appreciate, and let them enhance your lives. I mean, there are, there's a lot of negativity online, and I've been guilty of it as well. And I'm trying to temper myself.
Same here. I struggle with it sometimes.
Because I don't want to be the old guy moaning about it's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I can come onto that in a second. I mean, back in the day, to be a DJ, you would have to have an excellent knowledge of music and be able to put it together in a certain way, because you couldn't fool people with smoke and mirrors that happens on social media. You weren't necessarily good at marketing yourself. The music that you played was the content. You were not the content. Now the DJ is almost the content,
it is.
And the music is secondary. So it's definitely a different dynamic. What I would personally prefer to focus on is the people that that make the music their content, rather than it being the me. And David Guetta's recently gone viral with a quote that he's
an entertainer rather
that he's
than
an entertainer. I mean, I'd argue you could be an entertainer and
I found
a
that
DJ.
a very self-aware comment. I like that.
Well, I think he got a hugely positive reaction because of that, and I think I've known David Guetta for over 20 years, and he comes from dance music culture.
I know,
he ran clubs in Paris. He would book Louis Vega. He would book Francois K. He would book his idols. That's how I started as well. I would put on, when I became a promoter, I'd book Norman Jay and I'd book Giles Peterson, and and these people were the people that I was just like, as a fan, I would pay to go and see them play. As a promoter, I was happy to book them and pay them, and then
play alongside them,
and invite other people and introduce them to, and that was again another example of growing my career. And David Guetta went through that process. Obviously, he was a producer, and his career exploded when he worked with Black Eyed Peas and Kelly Rowland and the whole beginning of that EDM thing. And then his life took a completely different course, and he's ended up being where he is. And more power to him. But I respect him because he did come from DJ culture.
Yeah,
he's just made a career for himself that he probably would never envisaged or expected when he was 30 years old, and he's gone with that.
I have respect for everybody who's made their way in this industry. I don't judge sometimes. Some people can be very snobbish in the scene in terms of I don't like the music and therefore I don't like the person, or I don't like the way they market themselves, so I don't like it. But, as you said, you forget sometimes, or people tend to forget, that these people also have legit roots. You touched on something earlier, a couple of minutes earlier.
Sorry, going back to what you were saying, there are people that have a viral moment, a moment in time that catapults them from being unknown to being into the public domain, and they get booked off the back of that. So, probably time will tell whether they have long-term longevity within the music industry, because maybe they'll get succeeded by the next person that has a viral moment and the next person. Whereas I think if you're known for having, knowledge, and maybe just operate a little bit underneath the zeitgeist of big followings and whatever, that your following is not going to jump onto the next person because they trust you and they value you. And there are plenty of people so if you're into disco and you followed Horse Meat Disco for 20 years, they've done nothing but introduce you to amazing disco records. And if that's your thing, you're always going to value that.
You're always going to go back to that,
So they've never had a hit. They're not amazing on social media. But they have a legitimate long-term career.
These are two things that I want to really sort of dig into a little bit, which one is longevity, and then also earlier, we can go back to that later on, where you talked about becoming a promoter. But let's first talk about longevity, because we're already on that kind of tangent. I feel that the attention span, or the time that artists have now, is shorter than ever. And you have very few players that have very long and rewarding careers. And, I call them the legends. And they have been around for ages. They will always be there. And their career just won't go away, because, they're just valued and they continue to be valued. But then I feel like the shelf life of a lot of producers has just gone down to like a couple of years almost, where there is a cycle where, you know, you maybe get to start enjoying a career for 3, 4, 5 years, but then the next generation is already in the starting blocks. And I feel that cycle is accelerated. What would you say for young artists trying to make it today, how you build longevity in your career and how you continue to be able to enjoy living of music when there's always people snapping at your heels and promoters are very quickly to move on to the next interesting guy?
The gateway to being a big DJ these days is definitely via being a producer. You know, if you're just an out and out selector, that's going to be a long road for you. And you know, I never produced records. I never felt that I was good enough, that I understood music enough to make great records. I'd always listen to somebody else's record. Dennis Ferrer record would come in, or a Masters of Work record would come in, and you know, Deep Dish, and I'd go, wow, that is just like, I could never get close to that. So in many respects, I took the easy option not to produce records because I didn't think I was ever going to be great. But what I did think I was good at was shouting about records that I loved. That I was a good I was a good marketeer. I was a good promotion guy. So I think, you know, with the gateway to being a DJ and a successful career, being producer, just try to make above average records because records seem to last for a weekend these days.
Yeah, that's
they come
what
and
I
they
feel.
go, and they come and they go really quickly because, in all honesty, they're not very good. You know, they're throwaway records. They're almost like DJ tools that serve a purpose in a club, but don't ever leave the dance floor because they wouldn't sound great on the radio, or they wouldn't sound great if you were, you know, in a boutique or in a restaurant or in a beach bar. You know, records don't seem to transition their immediate environment as much as what they did back in the day. And records that were made back in the day were normally a result of collaborations. You know, if you're sitting there on your laptop making a record on your own, how are you going to raise your own bar? Whereas if you're working with a bass player who just does this lick that just takes you somewhere, go, that's amazing, let's sample that, or let's focus on that. And then the guitar player comes in, but, you know, and then all of a sudden you've got everybody bouncing off of each other, keyboard player, etc. And you're in a place that you never, ever expected you were going to be in. You know, and if I look at records from back in the day, you know, vinyl records, and where they have got the, you know, the credits of the people that were involved in, you obviously don't have that in the digital world. There'd be songwriters involved, there'd be key players, there'd be percussion players, and whatever. And I believe the music was better because it was collaborative. Rather than just you just doing,
that is
taking
so
things
important. That's so interesting, Simon. I can just agree very much for that. Every record that I've ever written that has kind of had something like, and they weren't not necessarily my most successful records, but the records that I felt were special were always in collaboration with somebody that just brought something new to the table. So
and it doesn't always work, obviously. Do you know what I mean? But I think that's your investment. It's like you know, we talk about investing in culture, and you know, obviously back in the day, I do try to stop myself saying that, but it's like if you wanted to put a record out, you would have to go into a studio, you would have to have an engineer, you would have to have all of these things. You didn't have computers and programs to be able to fix, you know, your bad keyboard playing for you and whatever. And I think that the human element in music gives records a funk that you don't necessarily appreciate. That, you know, the keys may be slightly off, they may be slightly out of time, but when things are perfectly in place, it makes them almost sterile.
It makes them robotic.
And the brain recognizes that subliminally. And so I think that human element is missing in music in these times. And so I think that, you know, by investing in working with people that are going to help you raise your game and to help you make better music, to be more creative, is a worthwhile investment. It's going to cost you money. But if it's going to cost you money, you're going to take it way, way more seriously, and you're going to pay attention rather than just making something on a laptop that you can just upload and release and whatever. Now, That's not to say that people don't make great records in that way. But you have to wade through far more average music now than what you ever had to, because the process is just far easier.
In a way, the democratization of the tools of making music has been an amazing thing, because it's made making music so accessible to everybody, but it's lowered the standard also incredibly, because, you know, as you said, back in the days, you'd have to go to a studio, you'd have professional session players, you know, like you'd have very competent people involved in a record, where it's nowadays, as you can do everything on a laptop, it's like, I would see that like the bar to entry is almost very amateurish.
Sure,
you know?
but it's the same. It's the same with DJing. Isn't it? Technology can do all the work for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Making records, technology can do all the work for you. But don't let it be the be all and end all of everything that you're doing. If you're going to use technology to make you to be able to DJ, use it as the foundation for you to be more creative.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So what are you going to do? Because, you know, we all know everyone can put a sync button and download the latest records and whatever and become a DJ overnight. Where is, you know, how is that exciting for the people in front of you? Because the next person's going to do it, and the next person's going to do it, and the next person's going to do it. You've got to become better than the competition. And I think that becoming better than the competition, if you can do it by yourself, more power to you, but not everybody can. So work with people, learn from other people, and then extend your vocabulary in terms of, and your knowledge and your capabilities by learning off other people until it becomes your own. And then don't stop there. Find the next level of people to learn. It's all about development. If you're doing the same thing as you did when you started 5 years ago, you're really, I don't know how long your career is going to last, because, as you say, TikTok, everybody, that seems to be famous because they've had a moment on TikTok. They try to recreate the next TikTok moment. It doesn't happen for them, so they fade away really quickly. All the major labels that subscribe to TikTok as their A&R resource now, and then they sign someone, these people are not able to follow it up, so they're left with lots of very
one-hit wonders.
Yeah, they come and they go.
Yeah,
and then these people are, probably struggle to come to terms with the fact they've been in the limelight. It's the same as being on reality TV on Love Island.
Yeah.
They're famous for 5 minutes, then they're not famous anymore.
It can be very, very disrupting
and
to your life.
Rates are, it's because they can't cope with the fact that they just had that moment in time, and they're not prepared for it. They're not ready for it.
Yeah, this is super interesting because I recently recorded a video which was titled "How to Make It in 2024," and I had to put social media in there. And what I put in there was that yes, you can maybe try to have a viral moment, be super consistent with your socials, and if you have that viral moment, but that's very hard to recreate, when you're making a good record and you know how to make a good record, you can always just go back to the studio and make another good record. And that is a tried and tested process where, you can't guarantee that record taking off, but it is very much in your own power, in your own hands of what quality you put out there and keep putting out there. And eventually something will connect again. I really believe that. But these viral moments are very, very hard to recreate and very hard to predict as well.
But, I don't know. It's been a couple of years since I've had the conversations with the people involved directly with social media companies and whatever. But even the staff at TikTok don't know what they're walking into.
Yeah.
It's like they can't create the viral TikTok moment because the public decides.
Yeah.
And as much as they try to force it, they're not able to do so. They have to deal reactively with the things that organically go viral. So, for an artist, it's really hard. If TikTok can't manage that process,
how are they going to do it? Yeah.
And I think what gets engagement is the things that are real, the things that are authentic. When I'm trying to post something on social media, if it just flows out of me effortlessly, because it's exactly what I'm thinking and I'm not trying to do something I feel uncomfortable with, those things get the great engagement. The things that I'm trying to, I don't know, maybe make a point with someone or, I just feel a bit awkward about it. I think there's something that people they sense it.
It's got to be authentic.
And once it's sensed that it's not authentic, then the algorithm comes into play, and then Instagram or TikTok, they switch it off and it's not as visible to as many people. But if it gets a good reaction, they seem to get behind those things. And it's all very well people saying, oh, the algorithm's fucked and, blah, blah, blah. But maybe it's your content that's fucked.
Yeah. I've always like basically thought that the latter of what you just mentioned is very much more the case. A lot of people like complaining about how the algorithm doesn't show their followers their content anymore or whatnot. But I really believe is that in a very rapidly changing landscape, you just constantly have to adapt and be on your toes and see like, hey, what is the way of doing these things now? And then also having consistency, and just trusting. I think consistency is probably the number one thing. It's the only thing that you can really manage.
Also, for sure. And it's like if you post something and it doesn't resonate, but it's real to you.
Yeah.
Just stay with it. It doesn't matter if everyone has this metric of popularity and scale
metrics.
and whatever.
Yeah.
So if you turn the likes off, but you've got a great post and you've got great likes on it, everyone knows you've turned the likes off because it's not had a great reaction.
Yeah.
So just own the fact that it hasn't had a great reaction.
I call that feature turning the likes off. I'm embarrassed about my engagement feature.
Sure.
But it's obvious why you've turned the likes off. You know who I really like, who's been doing this for a long time, is Honey DJing. And Honey posts a lot of stuff that's not really popular, stuff that matters to her, stuff that matters to her about the culture, the music, the LGBTQ community, lots of different things, movies, old movies that she likes,
art, fashion, other people's music, labels that she's loved, that she's grown up with.
And a lot of that stuff doesn't get very high engagement, yet she has a huge following. And she turns the likes off for everything. So she just some people will say like, hey, I get a good post, I leave the likes on,
right?
And I get a bad post, I turn the likes off. For her, the likes are off for everything. She's not playing that game.
Consistency.
Yeah, she's not playing that game, and she's just sharing what she loves. And I have a lot of respect for that.
But that again, Honey DJing, not an overnight success.
No,
she paid her dues for 20 years.
Yes.
DJing in Chicago, New York, and now is her time. And it's really great to see someone that really appreciates and understands and values the culture, still promoting the culture as important to her as when she first discovered it.
Yeah.
And I think that just makes her more of a viable artist as opposed to the entertainer that we talked about.
Yeah.
So
that's
a really quite a I mean, how do you quantify who's a legitimate artist and who's an entertainer and who's just a DJ? It's a tough kind of subject to pin down, really.
It is a tough subject, and I think also the lines are probably blurred somewhat. You'll have people that veer into the entertainer sort of territory, but then also they have a legit background and they know good music as well. So.
Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Phones in clubs.
Yeah, of course, please.
Right?
Yeah.
So, massive subject, yeah. Whenever anyone posts a video and everyone's got their phones out, look at that crew.
Did you see that kind of music viral video?
I did.
Where nobody was moving and it was just that kind of moment.
I find that sad.
I find it sad as well. Because I like their music a lot and I like the guys a lot as well.
But two things. It's like, if you don't want people to get their phones out, stop putting the DJ on a huge stage with a huge LED screen behind them. So it's a show. If you go and see Afterlife or Eric Prydz and whatever, and there's a hologram reaching out to the crowd and whatever, you're encouraging people to get their phones out. And they're there for the show. They're not necessarily there to dance.
It becomes more like a concert almost,
going back to the David Guetta thing, it's like it's not a DJ set. You're not there to dance. Stop playing all your hits one after the other, because the kids are there. They've paid £50, £70 to hear you play your biggest record, and they want to have a memento of that, and they want to tell their friends they're there. So if you're going to play your hit records, the kids are going to get their phones out. I think the problem with phones is initially I was a huge supporter of people getting their phones out for moments during a night. It would be a big moment. You'd see all the phones come out. They would share it. That was great marketing and great awareness. But then what I think happened with certain DJs, they started to play for people to get their phones out. So they changed the way they were playing. And I remember vividly playing a set where the DJ before me literally played every house music classic and edit, because all they wanted the people to do was to get their phones out and for them to share it on social media. And I stood there and I was just like, what can I do now? I literally had to just almost like press reset.
That's the only thing you can do.
Because one, they played every house classic and whatever, so I couldn't then play the same records again. And two, that's not really what I was about. And so, but that was the first time I noticed that a DJ had, because they never used to play like that. They would always phone me up and say, I'm playing the weekend. Have you got anything new for me? What's something coming? I want to be up front. I want to introduce people to new music, not just to play them what they already know, so that they can get their phones out and whatever. So at that point, I noticed that DJs had started to change their approach to their sets,
and pandering to that,
and it's a thing now. Kids are. I don't think you're going to persuade them not to get their phones out, especially the younger kids.
That sort of viral video that went viral for kind of the wrong reasons, at the Kind of Music gig where everybody had their phones out and nobody's moving, that was, for me, I felt very sad when I saw that, because I think they make great music. I think they are real artists. I think they play very long sets as well. They do. Which is conducive to people losing themselves in the music and dancing.
Can I say something about that moment as well? That club was so oversold that people could not dance anyway. The only thing they could do was get their phones out.
You're so right. That's it.
It's like, and I get it, and I'm not criticising. Well, maybe I am criticising the club.
I am criticising that. Sometimes you get too high and you're just like, what the hell, it's like sardines in there. And it's like, can you maybe let in a couple of hundred people in less and people can actually dance?
Ibiza has a new club next year, Universe, which is a big club,
Is it the old Privilege?
It's the old Privilege, 8,000 people. Now, that actually may be a good thing.
Plenty of space.
If it spreads 8,000 people out of the other clubs into that space, so that people do have room to breathe and dance and enjoy, maybe you'll see a different reaction on the dance floor. To when people are playing their music. And I get, Ibiza is, it's become like Vegas. It's the biggest clubs, the biggest DJs,
There's a part of me that really likes that, because it's like this is where our industry shows what they can do to the highest level, but at the same time, I guess it kind of takes away from having genuine club moments where it's not about facing the stage, it's about dancing with a girl or a guy, and losing yourself in a moment, and I haven't felt like that in Ibiza for a long time. The most I feel like that in Ibiza is at DC-10, because there is no obviously they got the backstage, but there is no cordoned off VIP section. Obviously, DC-10, they ram people in there as well, but at least it doesn't have this sort of tier system of people being separated by how much money they pay.
Yeah, and also the other thing about social media in the respect of phones is that when a DJ plays their big record, the phones come out.
Yeah.
They may not have been out for 40 minutes before that, but the big record comes on and everyone in unison and whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that the night was like that.
Which I guess the Kind of Music video was probably a case of that as well, because it was their biggest record.
They're playing Move, yeah?
Yeah.
So the biggest record of the summer in Ibiza.
So
Can we talk about that quickly?
Yeah, sure.
There's been a shift in the music industry, very, it's been coming for a long time, but I think it's almost like here now as a reality. Kind of Music self-released their record.
I know.
They didn't assign it to a major. They didn't upscale it to an established label.
Yeah.
They backed themselves, and they're going to receive the rewards from backing it themselves.
Yeah.
And they've had success, and it's a top 10 record all over the world. Sonny Fodera has had 2 top 10 records in the UK and a top 5 record on his own Solotoko record label. And another, Relax My Mind, was self-released. So
By another.
By another.
Yeah.
So these are 3 and 4 of the biggest records, dance records out there, without the need of the artist getting the assistance of a record label to help market and then promote them. So I think that once you've established yourself, I do believe that artists, when they're beginning and need to establish themselves and they need to grow and they need to be put in front of more people so they can grow their own communities and their own audiences, they will require to be signed to record labels, and the record labels will give them the platform for them to grow their own communities and their visibility. But once you get to that level, you're in control of your own destiny. Yeah. That is a really exciting moment for a producer and an artist.
Well, I would argue even well before that, before you get to that level, because I was struggling to get music signed for many years.
I saw your conversation with Archie a couple of episodes ago, and so I think I know where you're going.
Eventually, I just bet on myself, and I had a streak of I finished about 8 records, and I played them out. I knew they were good in the club. I didn't get any responses from the labels that I was sending them to. And at some point, I was like, I've just got to back myself now. And I self-released them, and I decided to go the vinyl-only route because I thought back then this is kind of a small pond, and I can make a bigger splash, a bigger impact in a smaller pond. And they all went like on the DJ.de charts. I had 6 consecutive number ones that came out, and that really was the start of my my DJ career. I totally agree with you. Like, visibility that you get on bigger brands is still very important, and especially when once you started sort of getting into, like, you're starting to get a little bit of attention, you're starting to get some gigs, but then you want to get bigger shows. You have to align yourself with one of the bigger brands.
Okay, so what we're saying here is there's almost three layers to your potential career.
Yeah.
When you're brand new and no one's heard of you, and you're one of 10,000 people submitting your demos to a label, you're going to get ignored.
Yeah.
Right? So take control and matters into your own hands. That's what I'm saying about being visible. Support the labels via charts. Support them by posting. Get in their periphery.
Play for some promo. Get into DJs'
Build
inboxes.
your own reputation so that when you do send that demo, there's a chance they're going to listen to it.
Exactly.
Because when you send it and you're literally on the first rung of the ladder, they've already got their friends, and their management company's probably got other people that they represent, and they're going to be the first people that they listen to their music because they've got an agenda and a reason to be putting those records out. Once you've created your own reputation, then the next stage is to maybe get that additional profile by collaborating with another label. You're giving the label hopefully some credibility and some great new music to promote, and they're giving you access to their followings and the fact that they may have good relationship with Beatport, Traxsource, Bandcamp, and you get that additional profile. But once you go past that and you have your own community and your own goals that you wish to achieve, you can play chess then. You can sign records to a label, or you can just go, I'm going to put this out for myself.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That is
You've got to get to the position when you're playing chess from the very beginning. Actually, you're maybe giving up a few pawns so that you can go and take someone else's queen, or and that's life as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I think you've nailed it there. That is super valuable for the people who are going to be listening to this podcast, because it's like, first bet in yourself, then get wider exposure by working with established brands. And then once you've got that traction in your career,
in control of your
then you're in control, and then you bet on yourself. I love that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the promotion side of things and doing promoting parties. As a DJ or somebody who wants to have a career in electronic music, at one point I realized, I came to the conclusion that you're not going to get around doing it all. At some point, you'll have to put on a party. You'll have to start your label. Your career, you will cut yourself short if you don't. How did you get into starting your own events? Was it a steep learning curve? How did you manage to go from, I assume, smaller parties to, pitching for a residency in Ibiza? And I just want to talk to you about also my first exposure to your brand, which was at my first visit in Ibiza in 2002. And I went to El Divino,
right, okay.
And I saw Junior Jack and Kid Cream.
Right.
I think it was 2003 or 2002, something like that.
2003, I believe.
Yeah,
2003 and 4, we were at El Divino, then we went to Passion.
Oh, yes, 2003 it was then, yeah 2003. So I was a huge fan of Junior Jack at the time, and that whole sound ruled supreme. I bought all of those records. So take me from small events to eventually having an Ibiza residency. How did you get there?
We did a number of events very early in our label's life cycle, because Eric Murillo had started Subliminal,
right,
and he started touring as Subliminal Sessions to create profile for his brand and his producers and the music that he was releasing. We were a new label, so we didn't have enough catalogue to do events on that scale. And obviously Eric Murillo was a superstar DJ at the time, so he could drive the events and the business. So we curated a couple of nights for Ministry of Sound in London. They, if you remember earlier, I said that they gave us the startup money.
Yeah.
So we had a relationship with them. So I think after our first year, we'd put out about 12 records. We were always about promoting the music that we were releasing. So that would dictate our lineups. We would never book the biggest DJ just so that we could sell tickets. It was always about booking the DJ talent that supported us by trusting us to release their music. That was the payback. And it made the events more authentic, I believe, right? So you wouldn't go and see the Rolling Stones and expect them to play a Beatles record.
Right.
So if you wanted to go to a Defected event, there were Defected artists there. So that was our early foray into doing events. What was happening at the same time was that Kiss FM, who supported underground dance music, had been bought by EMAP, I believe, was a big media corporation. And media corporations need to make money, and advertising was a key to them making money. So they didn't want Kiss to play underground music anymore. They wanted them to play mainstream pop music. So the playlist at Kiss changed, and we couldn't get our records played anymore. So in order for us to promote our records in front of the public and in the public domain, we had to go on the road like a band would tour. So we decided to do the In the House series, and we were a house music label, and someone being in the house said that they were present. So it was a great touring kind of brand. And then at the time, compilations were really popular.
I was just about to say, I bought those compilations.
So we started the Defected In the House compilation series. So, we would go to Dimitri from Paris or Masters at Work or Junior Jack and Kid Cream. Junior Jack and Kid Cream. Junior Jack would have a big record with his samba, so he would play at our gigs, so that would help sell tickets. He'd then do the compilation, that would help tickets. Then he put his album out. So there was great synergy between all of those things. And then when we first went to clubs with the concept, and it was a new concept, they were just like, you're never going to sell any tickets, you're a record label, we're not interested. But then when we put all the pieces of the jigsaw together and we sold 80,000 Dimitri from Paris in the House compilations and Junior Jack albums and whatever, and Masters, they would align themselves with those because they're established artists. They knew that we would market it in conjunction with the releases. So the sum was far greater than the parts, and the parties became really, really popular. This was pre-social media. But we had consistency with our releases. We were a house music label. So if you were a house head in the world, you'd get to know about it because of flyers or, posters on walls or ads in magazines, or the club had a reputation for curating house music like Ministry of Sound would have and whatever. So you would get the house community come to support your events. They would have a great time. They'd go away talking positively about it. They may buy the album. Maybe they hadn't bought the album. Maybe they bought the album and they came to celebrate that they loved the album, or they went away having a great time and then they bought the album. It's hard to know which comes first. But that was the growth. And we did El Divino initially on a Sunday night, and we did okay. And then the Friday night became available and we smashed it. And then we got offered Pasha, and then we did 8 years at Pasha. The moment we got Pasha, we were best club on the island. Pasha space, arguably, depending on your musical.
Glamorous as well.
Yeah, totally fitted the disco sensibilities, house sensibilities. Space was probably a little bit more techno, a little bit more progressive musically in its output. But the moment we got Pasha, we were on the global stage, and the events really started to take off from that moment. And then social media started to come into play, because you could post about, take some footage at the gig and post it on your YouTube channel or post it on your Facebook channel, your MySpace channel, whatever the
people would want to relive the night.
Yeah. And then all of the other platforms come into play, Facebook and Twitter and all this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden, you were directly connected to your audience because they would follow you. And that's even more of a reason.
I'm trying to remember the website that was big at the time. It was just a clubbing website. It was even pre Facebook, pre MySpace, and it was this. I forgot it now.
Beat TV. There was Beat
TV, and then there was another platform. And people would just go on this platform and just see like what club night, and you could look at all the pictures. They'd have photographers there, and you could look at all the pictures.
I think I think we were one of the first people to employ a cameraman. To document our events, to literally make sure that if there was a moment, people didn't have cameras on their phones. No. So you had to have someone with a proper lumpy old unit he used to carry around with him, and just make sure he documented the great DJs, and if they were aligned with our release schedule, they also promoted our records as well. I think that, holistically, that was a great moment for us. So.
Did you hire somebody at the time to run the club side of things, or was it just trial and error to figure things out how this works? Because sometimes I'm just always wondering, how do you, even as a smaller label or as an up-and-coming label that's even starting to make waves, figure out what the deals are and how you actually make money? You get a door split, how do you figure out the way the club promotion game works?
As I said earlier, I think you look at opportunities and you look at the environment you're in and you grow into those situations. So whenever we decided something was talk about documenting events, we did YouTube magazines. They're probably still on YouTube. We'd do a 30-minute club magazine, where we'd interview Axwell, or we'd interview David Guetta, or we'd interview Roger Sanchez or whatever, because they were the big DJs at the time, and they were at Pasha, and our cameraman was there. So we'd go, can you spare us 10 minutes? Can we do an interview? And then you'd put them on. And then it became popular enough to go, right, there's something going on here. We'll get some proper staff. Initially, I think we would share the duties amongst the staff that we already had to see whether it was viable in terms of it. It would either be selling us something or it would be marketing us something so that we could then sell it, the records. Ultimately, I think that the world has changed, but it was all about whatever money we made at that moment in time, we would reinvest into signing great records. Ultimately, the label is defined because we signed some amazing records, whether it be Bob Sinclair, I Feel For You, or Masters at Work to Be in Love, or Paul Johnson, Get Down, or whatever. We had a finite budget. We couldn't compete with the majors. So any money we made, we reinvested into signing great records. That gave us association with great artists. That gave us a great reputation. And the music defines how great a label it is. Motown is defined by the great music and the great artists. You know, Philly International, Def Jam, they're all defined because they released amazing, seminal, influential records with longevity. It was always about reinvesting. And, you know, Defected never made... Everyone goes, you know, says to you, oh, you've made this and you've done that and whatever. But we never made any money for the first 17 years of our existence.
Wow.
We were hand-to-mouth, reinvestment. And what changed the game for Defected was streaming. And everyone says streaming, oh, there's no payback, etc.
Yeah.
But it's just another layer of income.
Yeah, I disagree.
You can't look at it as your be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
You know, for some artists, it is their be-all and end-all, and obviously the return isn't great if that's the case. But if it's just another layer of your activity... so a lot of the records that we'd put out, we'd already sold on vinyl, we'd already sold on CD, we'd already sold it on iTunes as a download. They'd paid for themselves, and then streaming came along, and people could just access them. You know, mobile tariffs came down.
And that IP is just continuing to pay dividends then.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you'd already made your... So it was just... And again, we just reinvested that money to make our events. What can we do now? Let's do a festival in Croatia. Let's make it interesting for our fans. If we talked about going to Ibiza again, we've done that for the last 15 years. What could we possibly say that was new? Let's keep our proposition interesting. Let's do a festival in Croatia. Initially, 1,500 people went.
Humble beginnings.
But they had an amazing time, so they went home and they told their friends. So the next year it was 2,500 people. Again, we didn't make any money. We reinvested in the talent, in the stages, in the experience. Those 2,500 people had an amazing experience. Next year it was 4,000 people. And, you know, initially those 4,000 people were... We had to shout really loud about it to make sure that people knew about the event and whatever. But then when it becomes so popular, you don't have to shout about it at all because the endorsement of the people that go there, a label shouts about an event they've got coming on, it's marketing, it's promotion. A punter shouts about an event, it's endorsement.
Yeah.
That is far more powerful than me saying I've got a great event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Says, I went to this thing, you need to go there because I just had the best time ever. That resonates with.
Well, I love all of this because it's also something that I need to hear because after venturing into a new type of business right now, and you kind of want an overnight success, but as you just reminding me now, it's you just have to reinvest, stay consistent, keep grafting, keep adding value to the community, and your moment will come. In a journey of sort of entrepreneurship, that's a very, very valuable message for me because sometimes you just want things to happen very quickly, and that is very rarely the case. And
we live in a world where it's information overload. It just keeps coming at you, which is why people's attention spans are so small these days because it's just relentlessly coming at you. So the only way that you're going to gain traction is through consistency of your offering and the people that value what you do because they will support you and they will come back to you and they will tell their friends. Yeah. That's how you grow. And if you let that bar slip just slightly, they just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, they'll notice as well.
Sure.
Yeah. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could do it all again, Simon?
I consider myself really fortunate. I managed to make my passion my career. I have no regrets at all. I've had great times. I've had not so great times, and you learn from your great times, and they serve to focus you. I think that whatever I've chosen to do, it's always been considered. It's never been reckless. I think if you do something that you bet everything on and it doesn't work for you, that can be a pretty lonely place to find yourself in. But I think if you believe in something and you're passionate about something, people will see that passion, and that is a great place to ignite a career. And initially, I think that it's certainly in music. don't put yourself under too much pressure.
Yeah.
Have a daytime job. There's no disgrace in having a daytime job and music being your hobby, and you learn in your craft, and then you get to a point where, okay, I feel comfortable enough now for this to be my long-term career, and I'm really, really going to go for it. But if you put yourself under that pressure from the very, very get-go, that may be not the best environment for you to be creative.
I agree.
To enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So if you make it your hobby first off and then just see where it takes you, there's a lot talked about work-life balance now with people. And, all the great sports person, Kobe Bryant didn't become the best basketball player in the world by
having a great work-life balance.
By going, I'm going to give up throwing hoops at 5 o'clock and whatever. He threw hoops till 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and whatever until he became the best in the world. So I think if you're ambitious and you want to succeed, you've got to go beyond what your competition is doing. You've got to be noticed and whatever. And then, when you get to that point that you can play chess because your circumstances change, I've been very fortunate. I've been married for 30 years. I have a really great family. But my agreement with my wife was that I was going to work really hard to make things happen so that we could bring up a family in the way that we wanted to bring up a family.
And she supported you in that.
And she supported me in that.
Yeah.
And, that's not for everybody to make those kind of decisions and whatever. So, I would turn down DJ opportunities because most of the DJ opportunities I took were because there was a secondary agenda. I could meet a great producer, someone I wanted to work with. I could go see a great record store. I could go see a distribution company, a publishing company,
right,
and whatever. So I would always maximize my time by DJing, but I could also go and do something that would be a benefit to the business as well. And then when I had the opportunity to spend time with my family, I made sure I spent it properly with them. So that was my work life. But I had a cause. My cause was music that I loved and family that I treasured. And and when you have kids, or you have a partner or you're in a relationship, that serves to focus you in a different way.
Yeah.
When I had my kids, I had to kill to eat.
Yeah.
So I was out there being an absolute hunter.
Hustling.
And hustling, yeah. So it was, and you just read those situations. So my advice is just look at the circumstances that you're in and maximise them as best as you can. Yeah, no regrets.
Amazing. I mean, that is a great thing to close this conversation on.
There was one other question though, wasn't there?
But we have another question, which is, what are you looking forward to in 2025?
I am looking forward to hopefully helping people in their careers. I'm going to do some mentorship. It's hard to do it on a one-to-one basis, so I'm actually going to start a podcast. So I'm going to be the competition a little.
I work from an abundance mindset. The pie is big enough for everybody,
and I agree with that. And and I'm like, wow, there's so many podcasts out there. But again, I'm going to start from zero.
That's amazing.
And that's going to make me hungry to do that. And hopefully people will learn. And I really like your philosophy about trying to help people that are getting started in the music industry and educate yourself, because the moment you stop learning, it's over for me. Do you know what I mean? I still read, I still listen to podcasts, I still try to discover new music. I still want to meet people that I think can inspire me.
And you have so much experience, a wealth of experience to pass on to the next generation. So this is music to my ears that you are going to venture into this space, and hopefully there's going to be some room for some further conversations further down the line in the future. I would love that.
Okay, and then lastly, I just want to help my boys.
Yeah.
My daughter just started work today at it's a brand new job for her at a management company. So that's her extending herself. My eldest has an Afro House label.
Yeah.
He's
Sondela.
up to 50 releases.
Yeah.
He's learning his way. And my youngest just graduated from Point Blank. He got his degree in music production.
Amazing.
So
that's what I studied, music production.
Right. Okay. So now he's now going to put himself into the marketplace and make records, and he's going to start his own label. and you know, I'm there for them.
I'm very excited to hear what the future brings for you, Simon, what the future brings for your boys and your daughter. And I want to remind everybody on that's been watching this podcast to smash the like button and to subscribe to the channel. We forget saying that every time, and this is the first time I'm actually managing to say this. So yeah, I mean, every YouTuber says this: smash the like button, subscribe, and I hope you got some value out of this amazing conversation. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you for the invitation, Ben.